The Zelthrey Dominion had crushed countless civilizations long before humanity's first spark of fire. To them, Earth was another trivial conquest, a fledgling world stumbling through its first steps into space. Commander Kether of the Dominion's outer fleet viewed the pale blue orb with little more than detached curiosity. He saw not a world of 7 billion individuals, but a resource node waiting to be filed, stripped, and processed. When his lieutenants reported that the locals still fought among themselves, he laughed. What threat could such fractious creatures pose to a dominion that spanned 1,000 stars? On the ground, Captain Elias Ward adjusted the cracked visor of his helmet as he picked his way through the ruins of the old observatory. The smell of scorched metal and pulverized stone clung to the air like ash. He had been a soldier long before the sky tore open, but nothing in his years of service had prepared him for the sight of alien warships blotting out the sun. Still, he felt no despair. Elias carried himself with the unyielding steadiness of a man who had long ago accepted that survival demanded action, not surrender. His orders were simple: keep his people alive, and find a way to make the invaders regret underestimating humanity. Dr. Amina Chin crouched beside a shattered console, her gloved fingers dancing across fragments of circuitry scavenged from both human and alien machines. She had once been a physicist concerned with black holes and theoretical energy systems. Now she was the closest thing humanity had to a bridge between alien technology and human ingenuity. Her dark eyes glittered with defiance. Where the aliens saw primitives fumbling with scraps, she saw opportunities. Every chip, every wire stolen from the Dominion's patrols was a chance to learn, to adapt, to strike back in ways the enemy did not expect. The first signs of resistance were whispers in the night, the flicker of unauthorized signals bouncing between satellites the Dominion believed they controlled. Elias had watched with grim satisfaction as one of those signals infiltrated a Dominion supply skiff. No human fleet had challenged the invaders. No army marched openly against them. Yet that single pulse of human code caused the vessel to lose course and plummet into the ocean. The victory was invisible to most, but those who fought in the shadows understood what it meant. Humanity could strike, however small, and force the enemy to bleed. Kether's underlings reported the incident as an accident. He accepted their words without question, his confidence in Dominion superiority unshaken. Yet in the silence of his chambers, he considered the flicker of irritation that gnawed at him. The humans were supposed to cower, not meddle with technology far beyond their grasp. It was inconsequential, he told himself. If their insolence grew, the Dominion would smother it as easily as one smothers an insect underfoot. But on Earth, the spark had caught. Elias stood before a ragtag assembly of survivors, engineers, farmers, students, soldiers, and told them what he had seen. His voice was low, steady, and it carried the weight of truth. A Dominion ship had fallen, not by chance, but because human hands had pulled it down. He reminded them that no invader, no matter how vast their empire, could prepare for the fury of a people with nothing left to lose. The room was silent when he finished, but he could see it in their eyes, the shift from despair to determination. Amina returned late that night, carrying a fragment of alien alloy etched with pulsing patterns of light. She laid it on the table before Elias, her lips curved in the faintest smile. "It's a language," she whispered, "and I think I can learn to speak it." In that moment, Elias understood the nature of their fight. Guns and missiles alone would never win. But human minds, human adaptability, that was their weapon, far above the planet. The Dominion fleet stretched like a crown of steel against the stars, its commanders blind to the seeds being sown below. In the eyes of the Dominion, humans were little more than animals struggling against inevitability. Yet in the eyes of Elias and Amina, inevitability was nothing more than a word. They knew the cost would be staggering, the blood price unimaginable. Still they would fight. They would turn every scrap of weakness into strength, every loss into fuel for fire. The first act of rebellion was small, a whisper in the vastness of space. But rebellion has a way of echoing louder than those who ignite it ever expect. The Dominion had not yet noticed, not truly. When they did, the galaxy would learn a truth buried beneath their arrogance. Humans were not prey. They were something far more dangerous. Elias raised his eyes toward the shattered dome of the observatory, where stars burned sharp and cold. Somewhere out there, the enemy believed victory was already theirs. He clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the war to come, and let a single thought anchor him. They would learn. They would all learn. Would you like me to continue directly into Section 2 in the same style, or would you prefer me to pause and give you an overview of how the transition will unfold before drafting? The Dominion's reprisal came swift and merciless. Dawn over the Pacific was shattered by the arrival of a dreadnought, its hull eclipsing the sun as it unleashed a column of fire upon a coastal city. Towers crumbled in seconds, bridges folded like paper, and the screams of millions became little more than static beneath the thunder of alien weaponry. To the Dominion, it was a warning. To humanity, it was a declaration. Captain Elias Ward stood on the ridgeline overlooking the smoldering ruins, his jaw tight with fury. He had fought wars before, but never one where survival itself was a prize. His comms crackled with frantic reports. Small bands of soldiers, engineers, and even civilians striking back however they could. A convoy of Dominion walkers ambushed with improvised explosives. A squadron of drones hacked and turned against their masters. Every act of defiance was a message, and Elias felt the weight of each one. Humanity was no longer waiting for salvation. It was clawing for its own survival. Dr. Amina Chen had barely slept in days. Her laboratory, once a clean hub of academic pursuit, had been reduced to a dim cavern car beneath a ruined power plant. Around her, scavenged alien components lay scattered in chaotic patterns only she seemed to understand. She worked feverishly, her mind burning with equations, translations, and improbable connections. To others, the fragments of alloy and circuitry were indecipherable. To Amina, they were a language waiting to be mastered, and each breakthrough brought her closer to unlocking weapons a Dominion would never anticipate. She knew that time was their greatest enemy, but she refused to yield to it. Far above Earth, Commander Ketter's irritation deepened into unease. Reports continued to arrive, describing human resistance not as scattered riots but as organized defiance. His lieutenants insisted it was only a matter of scale, that once the full weight of the Dominion's arsenal descended, the humans would fold like every other species. Yet Keter found no comfort in those words. There was something unervingly stubborn in these creatures, a refusal to bow even when annihilation stared them in the face. He dismissed his doubts with the cold logic of superiority, but a whisper of fear clung to him. Elias gathered his people in a makeshift war council, lit only by the flicker of a stolen Dominion holo projector. Maps of Earth glowed across the cracked walls, highlighting alien patrol routes and occupation zones. Around the table sat soldiers with weary eyes, farmers with callous hands, and engineers with grease-streaked faces. They were not an army in traditional sense, yet the unity that bound them was something no empire could quantify. Elias spoke without theatrics. He told them they would not win by strength of arms alone, but by cunning, resilience, and the will to fight when no one else dared. His words were not polished, but they resonated. Each face in the room reflected the same truth. Humanity was done kneeling. The first major strike came at dusk. A Dominion armory, hidden beneath a mountain range, was breached not by orbital weapons, but by a coordinated assault of hack drones, sabotage machinery, and human sabotage teams who tunneled through the rock by hand. Elias led from the front, his rifle slung low, his every command sharp and decisive. Amina remained behind, guiding the infiltration through encrypted channels, her voice steady even as alarms blared across the Dominion's frequencies. Explosions lit the night sky as the armory collapsed on itself, taking thousands of tons of alien munitions with it. For the first time, the Dominion suffered a wound it could not easily dismiss. In the aftermath, humanity celebrated not with cheers but with quiet determination. Around makeshift fires, survivors shared food, weapons, and stories of loss. Elias walked among them, offering a nod here, a steadying word there. He felt the crushing responsibility of every soul who looked to him for guidance, but he bore with the calm certainty of a man who understood that leadership was not about glory but endurance. Amina sat alone for a while, her gaze fixed on the alien fragment glowing faintly in her hands. She whispered to herself, testing the strange syllables she had deciphered, and smiled faintly at the thought that perhaps the Dominion's greatest arrogance was believing its language could not be stolen. Above Earth, Kether raged. He ordered entire districts razed, hoping fear would shatter resistance. But each act of cruelty only hardened humanity's resolve. He could not understand it. Every other species had broken under the Dominion's heel, yet humans fought harder with each loss. To his mind, it was illogical. To humanity, it was inevitable. The struggle was far from won. For every victory, the Dominion unleashed devastation in kind. Cities were reduced to ash, and families were torn apart. Yet amid the destruction, the shape of something new emerged, a unity Earth had never known. Old rivalries dissolved, borders faded, and the stubborn individuality that had once divided humanity now bound it together in defiance. Elias saw it in every face that refused to surrender, and Amina felt it in every stolen fragment of alien knowledge she bent to human will. The Dominion had come to Earth expecting submission, expecting a swift conquest to add to its endless ledger of victories. What it found instead was a species that refused to be measured by the same scale as others. Humanity's weapons were crude, its technology inferior, but its spirit was unlike anything the Dominion had ever faced. As Elias stood once more beneath the vast night sky, scarred by streaks of fire from orbital bombardments, he felt no despair. He felt the weight of the coming war pressing upon him, heavier than any burden he had ever borne. But within that weight burned a flame that refused to die. Amina joined him, her voice quiet but firm. "They think they've seen what we can do," she said. "They haven't seen anything yet." And in the darkness above, the Dominion fleet prepared for a total war, blind to the truth that the longer they fought, the stronger humanity became. The next clash would not simply test weapons. It would test the very limits of will. Would you like me to go straight into Section 3 next, keeping the same focus style, or pause so we can refine the direction of the climax together before I draft it? The Dominion's vengeance fell with the weight of a collapsing sky. Entire continents trembled under the assault of their fleets, and for a time the Earth itself seemed to mourn. Cities vanished in firestorms, oceans boiled with plasma strikes, and the horizon glowed with the ashes of the fallen. To the Dominion, this was inevitability made manifest. To humanity, it was the crucible in which their resolve would either shatter or harden beyond measure. Captain Elias Ward trudged through a field of ruins where once a thriving metropolis had stood. His boots crunched over glass that had been skyscrapers, and the acrid scent of burned steel filled the air. He carried the weight of too many dead, his own losses etched deep into the lines of his face, yet his eyes remained fixed forward. Every devastation carved into him another reason to fight. His soldiers followed not because he commanded them to, but because they recognized in him a will that mirrored their own. Dr. Amina Chin worked in a subterranean chamber, its walls lined with the jury-rigged remnants of alien technology, fused with human innovation. She had unlocked something remarkable, an adaptive algorithm capable of bending Dominion control systems to her will. It was dangerous, volatile, and imperfect, but it was theirs. Nights bled into days as she tested, recalibrated, and risked everything on a hope that this creation would tip the balance. Where Elias embodied unyielding defiance in the field, Amina represented the intellect that transformed scraps into weapons of survival. Together, they were the twin faces of resistance, action and ingenuity. When word reached them of a full Dominion fleet descending on the last major stronghold, there was no hesitation. Elias gathered every unit, every volunteer, and prepared them for what would likely be their final stand. The resistance was no longer hidden pockets of survivors. It had become a single organism, unified by necessity and fueled by vengeance. People who had never held a weapon now stood alongside seasoned soldiers, each determined to bleed the enemy no matter the cost. The battle began with the scream of engines ripping across the sky. Dominion warships descended in formation, their weapons flaring with blinding energy. Yet instead of retreating, the humans surged forward. Elias directed squadrons of retrofitted aircraft, their wings patched with scavenged alien alloys. Drones swarmed like a living tide, many destined for suicide runs that struck at the vulnerable joints of the massive invader craft. Every explosion lit the battlefield with chaotic brilliance, a testament to the willingness of humanity to sacrifice everything for freedom. Amina's voice guided them through the storm. She transmitted commands woven with her algorithm, seizing Dominion systems for fleeting but critical moments. Shields faltered, Targeting arrays misfired, and entire frigates turned their guns on their own allies before control was wrestled back. Each victory was temporary, but each one bought precious seconds, and seconds meant survival. The Dominion responded with fury. Plasma beams scorched entire districts, and firestorms swept through human defenses. The ground shook beneath the relentless onslaught, and for a moment even Elias felt the edge of despair. But then he saw them, ordinary men and women standing firm amidst annihilation, refusing to break. He shouted orders through the smoke, his voice carrying not as command but as a vow. Hold the line. Make them bleed. As the battle raged, Amina pushed her system beyond its limits. Her console sparked, the air thick with the ozone scent of burning circuits, but she refused to stop. Her hands trembled as she unleashed one last override, channeling her code directly into the Dominion Dreadnought's command nexus. For a heartbeat, silence fell across the battlefield as the towering vessel hesitated, its weapons dimming. Then, with a roar, its own guns turned inward, tearing into its escort fleet in a storm of friendly fire. The sky erupted in chaos. Elias seized the moment, rallying his forces. He led a charge that exploited the enemy's confusion. Human artillery, cobbled together from salvaged tech, pounded the invaders with devastating effect. Ground troops swarmed disabled walkers, planting charges that tore through their armored hulls. Against all logic, against all odds, the Dominion line faltered. Commander Kether, watching from orbit, could not comprehend what he saw. Every other world had fallen swiftly. Every other people had crumbled before the Dominion's might. Yet these humans, fractured and fragile, had turned desperation into victory. His final transmission, intercepted by a Mina system, was laced with disbelief and fear. They fight as if they are born for war. They will not break. When the smoke cleared, Earth was a scarred shadow of its former self, but it still stood. The Dominion fleet, crippled and in retreat, left behind wreckage scattered across the atmosphere. Humanity had not merely survived. It had endured, and in enduring it had won. Elias surveyed the battlefield with weary eyes. Around him, survivors embraced one another, their faces streaked with soot and tears. He felt no triumph, only the steady certainty that the war was not truly over. The Dominion would return, perhaps with even greater fury, but humanity would be ready. They had shown the galaxy something the Dominion could never erase, that no empire, no matter how vast, could conquer a will that refused to kneel. Amina joined him. Exhaustion etched into every line of her face, yet her eyes still burned with fierce light. She held up a fragment of data salvaged from the Dominion systems, a promise of further knowledge, further weapons, further preparation. "They'll come again," she said quietly. Elias looked out across the horizon, where the first rays of dawn pierced the smoke and bathed the ruins in pale gold. He nodded once, his voice steady. "Then we'll be ready." In that silence, with the planet battered yet unbroken, the truth of humanity's nature resounded louder than any weapon. The Dominion had seen a fragile species. What they found instead was a fire that could not be extinguished. And that fire, now kindled into an inferno, would one day carry humanity beyond survival, toward dominance. Would you like me to expand this ending into an epilogue-style passage that teases humanity's future role in the galaxy, or should I leave it closed here with a strong HFY punch? The Dominion's retreat left behind a silence almost heavier than war itself. The skies, once scarred with the glow of orbital bombardments, now stretched wide and empty, littered with the wreckage of shattered ships drifting like bones in the upper atmosphere. Humanity had survived, but survival was not the same as peace. Beneath the smoke and ruins, a question lingered in every heart. What came next? Captain Elias Ward walked through the husk of the city that had once pulsed with life. Children's laughter no longer echoed through the streets. Instead, the air carried the groan of collapsing steel and the crackle of fire devouring what remained. His boots left prints in the ash, and every step was a reminder of those who had not lived to see the Dominion beaten back. Around him, people worked to clear rubble, to build shelters, to dig graves. Victory had not brought rest. It had brought responsibility. Elias bore it all with the same steady weight he had carried through battle, though inside, the scars gnawed deep. Dr. Amina Chin remained consumed by her work. In the heart of a makeshift laboratory powered by scavenged generators, she unraveled fragments of Dominion data salvaged from the battlefield. Her hair was matted, her eyes shadowed by exhaustion, yet her hands moved with relentless precision. She saw in the alien code a glimpse of something greater. Maps of the Dominion's empire, whispers of technologies that reach beyond imagination. Humanity had tasted victory, but she understood better than most that it was only the beginning. The Dominion was vast, and Earth's defiance would not be forgotten. Their survival had made them a target. Reports trickled in from across the globe. Scattered bands of humans who had fought in isolation now sent word of survival. Eager to connect, to unify, resistance had forged unlikely alliances between nations once divided, and now those alliances threatened to reshape Earth itself. There was no returning to the world before the invasion. Borders had blurred, old rivalries had been buried beneath the rubble, and something new, something stronger, was being born. Elias saw it clearly. Humanity was no longer a fractured species. It was becoming a singular force. Yet even in victory, danger lurked. The Dominion was wounded, not destroyed. Ketha was dead, his dreadnought reduced to wreckage, but commanders like him numbered in the hundreds, perhaps thousands, across the stars. Amina decoded transmissions that confirmed what she had feared. The Dominion had taken notice. Earth's defiance was spreading like a rumor across the galactic corridors, whispered in fear by the conquered and scoffed at by the powerful. The reprieve humanity now enjoyed was temporary, a pause before the storm. Elias convened what remained of the resistance leaders in a subterranean chamber carved from the ruins of a government bunker. There were no uniforms now, no flags, only survivors bound by the memory of fire and the promise of tomorrow. He told them the truth. Earth was no longer merely defending itself. It was preparing for the inevitable return of an empire unwilling to accept defiance. His voice carried no flourish, no false hope, but the conviction in his words lit the chamber brighter than the flickering lamps. Humanity could not wait for the next attack. Humanity would have to rise. Amina's research offered both promise and peril. The data fragments revealed weaknesses in Dominion systems, cracks in their vast machine that could be exploited. But it also revealed the scale of what they faced. Empires spanning hundreds of worlds, fleets beyond counting, weapons that dwarfed anything Earth could imagine. Each revelation weighed on her, pressing down like a mountain, but she refused to let despair take root. Knowledge, even terrible knowledge, was a weapon, and she would wield it. Night fell heavy over the battered Earth, but the stars above no longer seemed distant. They glimmered like beacons, reminders that humanity was no longer bound to one world. Elias stood outside the ruins of the observatory where his journey had begun, gazing at those distant lights. The thought that once might have dawned at him now filled him with grim purpose. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had just announced its presence in blood and fire. The Dominion would come again, but next time, Earth would not face them as prey. Beside him, Amina joined, her face illuminated by the faint glow of her handheld console. She handed him a projection, a star map filled with routes, signals, and uncharted systems. "They think this is where our story ends," she said softly. "But maybe it's where it begins." Elias closed his hand over the device, his gaze never leaving the sky. The ruins at his feet were a scar, but scars were reminders of wounds endured, and endured wounds became strength. Around the world, scattered fires of defiance burned not as embers, but as the first sparks of something greater. The Dominion had come seeking conquest, and left with a lesson carved into the fabric of their empire. Humanity had endured the impossible, and in enduring it had changed. The war had scarred them, united them, and awakened something that no empire could extinguish. The silence of the night was broken only by the wind whispering through shattered stone, but to Elias it sounded like the first breath of a future not yet written. Humanity had bled, but it had not broken, and somewhere in the cold reaches of the galaxy, the Dominion would remember that. Earth was no longer just a conquered world. It was the birthplace of a fire that, once unleashed, would spread until the stars themselves bore witness. Do you want me to continue beyond Section 4 into a new arc, like an interstellar campaign of humanity pushing outward? Or should I leave it sealed here as a strong, ominous cliffhanger?